GRM Office 5521, Private Room 14, August 2021, Saturday, yay. We will have, things on our schedule, I would say. Quick overview about everything we did. We will consider, maybe have the observation at the blog, the risk report the risk report 2021.blogspot.com. In the very first moment, we do not consider a great thing have the operation third wind, but we, take a look on it and made a review, and results are there. Maybe. Then we will consider that the last post exposed that this blog, which is an instrument to present ideas by free will, by goodwill, because sometimes we have so much under so much pressure, I would say, as suppressing our basic needs, basic rights, basic things that we must have escape, and the way the way that we found to expose the risk is this, because it's an interest that involves everybody and anyone. It's a major field. It's something huge. Article 144 of our Constitution. Then we will take a look at this piece of the blog, this part, that maybe we can have one very curious pattern, which is the interest, which is a relevant word, to replace or have new pathways after we close some specific doors used in a not authorized way as clandestine modules inside the communication service, sometimes to collect data, sometimes to set a misperception about circumstances that are very relevant at the major fields, as security, as risk, as one specific type of risk, which is the financial risk, implying the financial security. At the communication area, will brings us to the fintech risk, and we report this. How this deep web problem, indeed, it's not proved as something that will impact the election, but you consider that is a problem, or maybe even a crime, despite it's not necessarily exposed as electoral crime in a very first moment. But as you can observe, the complexity of the conjuncture that we are living around the globe, especially after those schedules crazy, full of maniacs doing a lot of things as crimes committed in all environment after have the corrosive argument as integration, which is the Constitution. And in general, you do this in areas with corruption from the top as the Supreme Court, that must protect the Constitution, but after have the contact with this kind of mentality, do not have the protection as Constitution or by Constitution, but act by activism. All these are proved, Then we will take a look at the blog, let's say. And this risk report is kind of having the AUDIT as the antivirus that sometimes has the VPN, but you must pay for this as the package that you had as choice. But considering a lot of distortion, of course, and collect of your access code and all things, we do not have this choice as VPN, but it's offering. But you must pay. And it's suggested to audit the antivirus and check distortions, crossing with other antivirus and others platform as communication at the digital space with transference of stimulus, sometimes financial, as the bank account, the e-commerce preference as purchase, because when you set a lot of problems for the user, the client, the customer, have the regular access of those services or options offered by the provider, you are kind of doing, some kind of clusterization to model the market according with new players or players under privilege scheme associated that won't have this kind of difficult situation at the thing, you are handmade in the market. This is maybe something illegal, and it's a consequence of institutional abuse linked with nepotism, with continuity, complained from local area, from local area, from global area. Global conjuncture against you, my friend. Then you will observe that sometimes those arguments corrupt all things and security things. We had a problem on Lebanon, I think. That was a big problem. We had this model, which was to observe that the similarity between two areas with the same structural result but a different moment as composition as resulting can be, under the audit maybe. It's the idea of the sequence when you have some apertures, I would say, as communication at your house, and you have a sequence to turn each instrument that you had on your house. But sometimes this sequence can be used as a circuit with specific traces, and when you'd like to have the access or keep the clandestine access at this circuit, despite we close some door, because the idea of circuit is open and close the doors. 1100. It's the idea of COBOL as decisional, procedural make decision tree. You will try to use, for instance, the remote access that you can have at the personal computer as notebook or something like this, the Bluetooth at the cell phone or something like this, and then you will have the code broken at the local access network as your Wi-Fi, and then you will try to spread this, because you are evidencing yourself as the systematical intention to broke this, have the clandestine communication, all patterns prove it, but you would like to evidence this a bit more, and for sure you did. Then we observe that we have a lot of financial crimes in Brazil, considering the corruption integrated, setting a big amount of money and having structural failure in each one of those guys that in a very specific moment, if this happen, for instance, at the public budget and all public department had failures in a very specific moment, they will need money. They will try to overtax the population and ask and beg for investment all around the globe, acting as an interface for criminal purpose, because they have not proper accountability and transparency. And then when this got associated with fintech crimes, by the seal that you have and by activism as protection, for instance, you can consider that the communication service is the same thing as a financial service. But this is a fraud management considering our white collar crime law. and by public corruption as failure integrated 7423 item 1 of the Brazilian Constitution, impacting the security, impact all, everybody and anyone, Article 144. And then you will attack straight my free will to research, to offer all things that we are offering during this month, at least 3 violations exposed, at least as a possibility. You must ask the offender. Then you will observe that this impact a premise as free will of the Brazilian society, state and government, all things. And in the same way, when you shut the population or a social media company in America, which the premise is the blast of freedom. And when you do this as not authorized access using the remote, Bluetooth, broke the code and a lot of things, setting the perception, the misperception of a family member, maybe you are impacting the base of society. The systematical behavior can't be considered aleatory. This can be observed, for instance, if you had a lot of things presented as dialogue or something like this, and creating the misperception of anyone. And if this impacts the election, I think that impacts when you change the preference of consume, and according with an English, a British theory, the consumer is, we, the people, are the consumers of the public service, which is fulfilled by criminals, and we are got forced to consume Manichaeism as criminal, that unfortunately will force us to be associated by the tax that we are over taxed and forced to pay. It's something evil, I would say. Then we will have on mind something like this. Do you consider that we can have the possibility of this model as creativity account that happens as the storage money that you had, considering all failures at the public area, could be used at the micro conjuncture in the same way as the macro conjuncture? For instance, if you have the systematical transference of money, which you had the storage of money that can be micro conjuncture Brazil, for instance, considering all public departments, or macro conjuncture with a specific continent, considering all nations with failures associated with this continent during one specific period, 2012-2021, by silence blind eye association, and have the transference of this around, which will have other continents with systematical failure. Some of those failures are unable to be recovered, as you can observe, and you have a small group have the control of this amount of money. Transference of interest supported sometimes by nepotism, sometimes by all things evidenced and proved. Then you are setting authorizations around the globe, which is the determinant of this matrix that indeed will be presented as the integration of failure around the globe, covered by the clandestine and illicit storage of criminal results that you have, and we are proving the criminal conjuncture. Of course, if this all happens, this happens in the same way as electoral crime, which is the access to the public institutions, main cause of all problems. We are cut this. It's recommended to have interrogatory in cases of warfare with authorities with legitimacy to kill, case by case, or have the privilege case by case, and avoid, because this is a transnational organized scam, that mafia groups act in the way they do. They kind of they are not rational. As I said before, they are kind of animals, and we will prevent a massive destruction. Witness protection, the corruption of crime, as you could observe, the last thing that we will have, and you consider that COBOL can make a mistake as we narrating, I think that it is not possible at this time, because we will have positive 1 and we will have the 0, 0, just two standard patterns of behavior. The positive 1 interval negative 1 is always, guilty, because it's the public corruption. The 0, 0 can be negative 1. If the 0, 0 can be negative 1, I have a duplicity here as a double count principle, which can be 0, 0, negative 1 as the formal authority inside the criminal scam since from the very beginning, as the infiltrate agents that you had, or if it is something 0, 0, which is a criminal that indeed is confirmed as a criminal that is dripping information after got associated with the mafia groups. If you are a member of the Supreme Court, you are guilty. If you are a retired member of the Supreme Court that got associated with the criminal groups around the globe as mafia, you are 0, 0, positive 1 in a very first moment. But if you got dripping information to preserve your retire payment as salary, you are 0, 0, negative 1, confirmed as 0, 0, negative 1. Something terrible can happen to you. Suggested to consider, have the search or do a visit at the FBI office, Capital City, Brazil, because they are a customer to deal with mafia scams. Have a nice night.